Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Peak Season Podcast. Appreciate you joining us today. We have a doozy of an episode. We hope it's timely. We are going to talk about cancellations, guests that have booked your place, blocked up a premium week, and now no longer want to come. Tyler, how are things going with you? Has this happened to you recently?
Yeah, doing good, Luke. And yeah, I've had some cancellations for summer. That seems to always happen when people book early, and everybody has their cancellation policies a little different. I think mine's set to firm. But yeah, we're gonna kind of talk about cancellations. So maybe they're outside that window of cancellation. So when to bend, when to hold firm, and how to protect your calendar.
Sure. And I think one timely piece of information that we could offer to our listeners right now is Airbnb recently introduced dynamic cancellation policies. You can change your cancellation policy at different times throughout the year, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great point, Luke, because I do think that, I don't know, at least for our markets, like I definitely would tend to want to be a little bit more strict in summer than, winter.
Yeah. So I think I usually will run like a firm cancellation. Outside of 30 days, they can cancel penalty free. Inside of 30, they can't. I try and be somewhat moderate with it because at the end of the day, I don't want to have restrictions that aren't necessary. And I also don't want to have restrictions that I'm not going to uphold if somebody messages me and asks, because policies are there for a reason, right?
Right.
But I used to run, and usually with new listings, I will run like a very liberal cancellation policy just to try and get boosted in the algorithm faster. And then as I get more of an established presence, I'll back that off and be a little bit more strict with it. But coming from the Smokies, which is very different than Northern Michigan, we would have a lot of people that would book a place, and then as the dates got closer, maybe next week, they would then try and book another place that was cheaper because there's so much competition in that market. And I pretty much just had to change my cancellation policy because everybody was waiting until the peak, the middle of the summer, the peak season, and then canceling on me. And
Right.
it was extremely frustrating.
So, and I think there's differences too, depending when the cancellation is and maybe how that impacts your strategy or your communications with guests. So, I'm just thinking about if I had a cancellation tomorrow for next weekend, would that change my communication to the guests versus cancellation that I received for August? And the answer is yes. I mean, I'm going to probably be a little bit more strict and hold to my policy on this winter or early spring cancellation.
So for the one that's next week, you would be more because it's closer in or because of the time of the year?
Both to be honest, because the reality is me getting a new booking for next week is not going to be as realistic as me getting a booking between now and August. Right. So I think that's the big key there. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What would you do in that same scenario?
Sure. So I try and frame everything with the overall big picture in mind of like what's best for me and my business. Right. So at a high level, like I want to be a good person first and foremost.
For sure.
I want to be a good person, but I also don't want to get trampled by people who are taking advantage of me. And I also don't want somebody in my cabin that doesn't want to be in my cabin. So I usually would try and hear out the situation, talk with the guests, see what's actually going on. And usually there's always a sob story, right? So XYZ happened, we can't make the trip, and we would like to go ahead and cancel. Or they're saying, can we just maybe move this booking? And that's one thing I never will do. I will absolutely never be like, oh yeah, we'll let you cancel now and we'll just reschedule for later.
Right.
So they're either getting their money back or they're not. So the first thing is I never let them reschedule because
why is that?
Well, first off, they're either going to reschedule to outside of your cancellation window, then cancel. So they're savvy enough to do that. But also when we're dynamically pricing, they're either going to be entitled to a partial refund or they're going to have to pay more, and they're not going to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, in this example, I want August dates for the same price I just paid for April.
Right.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. No,
so to me, it's not worth the work to be in, because you're talking about a several step process of, okay, you want to cancel. They probably don't even know when they want to come back. And then they're going to message you later and say, hey, can we use that weekend? And then you're going to be like, I mean, it's just a whole big thing. So I'm just not really into it. And I don't really want the back and forth of having to upcharge them for another weekend or whatever. I would rather just say, here's a refund, or I'm not going to be able to refund you, and let's move on to what's next.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. At the end of the day, it's still about being human. and understanding you have a business and you, to your point of, you don't want somebody who doesn't want to be at the property. So I would do the same thing. The first is just trying to understand what's happening, but let's say the guest is trying to cancel for potential weather. Like we're not forecasters, weather forecasters, but every scenario is different. You know what I mean? So I think it's one of those things like try to hear them out, see if it's sounds like a legitimate excuse or a legitimate reason versus an excuse, and then either maybe you refund them just because you feel like it's going to be troublesome or could impact your reviews, versus trying to maybe help them navigate their concerns
Yeah.
and be able to come to a resolution.
Right. So what I usually will look for is if it's a weather related thing, is the National Weather Service or state and local authorities saying like don't travel, don't go out on the roads? Are there evacuations, restrictions, whatever that looks like? And in that case, if they called Airbnb, assuming they booked on Airbnb, they would probably get their money back straight from Airbnb. So I'm not even going to give them a single issue about that. And also, if it's that like that, I don't really want my cleaners out on the roads. I just don't want
Yep.
to deal with. It's not worth the expense to me to force them to come.
Yeah.
Now, are they messaging saying, "Hey, it looks like it's going to rain this weekend. We'd rather come next weekend." That's when I'm going into carefully explaining that, hey, I have a cancellation policy basically because your reservation not only covers the use of the cabin, but also you blocking other people from using the cabin.
Hmm.
So I was not able to book this weekend because you have been blocking this weekend, and that is part of the reservation. So in fact, your
Right.
reservation has already covered that. So usually what I'll go into then is say, hey, if you want to cancel right now, that's fine. I'll approve it, but I will only approve a refund for the days that I'm able to rebook at the rate that I'm able to rebook them.
Yeah. I've had 2 instances where I've used that strategy, and both times the guests have came, and they left me 5-star reviews. So I think you're right. You're kind of you're understanding and willing to kind of make a compromise, right? But helping them understand what it means when they reserve and that bigger picture is, I think, helpful for
Yeah, and
for
that's sort
people.
of like a trident. So I do the first, I understand.
Yep.
Second, this is how it works when you block the calendar. It's not that you set foot in my property, not you block the calendar, which is the first part of this. Next, I will make an exception if I'm able to rebook. And then
Mhm.
third, I'm not sure if you purchased travel insurance or not, but if you did, I'd be happy to help you with any documentation
Yeah.
that you need for that. Because they got offered several times during their checkout, both in my messaging and on whatever platform that tried to upsell them travel insurance.
Travel insurance. Yep.
So, and they
Exactly.
said no. So,
No, I
in
think that's
almost every
another
case,
great
they said
point.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to communication, right? To your point, they're getting it, let's say on Airbnb or Verbo if they're booking through there. But if you're also adding that in your communications, then they're seeing it multiple times. So we talked about, maybe somewhat of a last minute cancellation. Let's talk about maybe we're getting towards summer. People are starting to fill up their calendars for summer bookings. Let's say you have a really high reservation, high revenue cancellation. How do you approach that? What are your thoughts, and what do you do to regain a booking?
Yeah. So typically, I mean, with my cancellation policies more than 30 days out, they can cancel
Hmm.
penalty free.
Yeah.
So if we're inside of 30 days during the peak season, that doesn't happen a ton, pretty rarely, really. But there have been times when it's been during the busier times of year where I've gotten somebody that canceled for whatever reason, or maybe they pulled at my heartstrings and I actually approved it. Usually that is something pretty serious where I just couldn't imagine saying no and I
Right.
fall for whatever they're saying. But I have noticed a lot of times when I approve that I get a bump in the algorithm and I usually end up booking it at the same or higher rate.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that comes from like 99% of my bookings are on Airbnb. Uh, maybe not 99, 90.
Hmm.
I think when you actually have to contact Airbnb customer service and approve something that the guest wanted that was outside of your policy, that does help you.
No.
And maybe that's just in my head, but maybe it's just a last minute peak season booking is something that's just going to get booked anyway. I don't know, but I do think that there's some sort of a invisible force that pushes you towards getting booked then. So I'm pretty okay if it's peak season to let one of those bookings go, especially if
Yeah.
I'm getting the impression that the guest is going to be a problem. And nobody needs that. So, and the more they're spending for the booking, I think the better chance that they're going to leave a bad review if we do force them to come or if they are out that money.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I don't know, historically for me, if I get a summer cancellation, it's before 30 days, and knock on wood, and it's, typically almost a few months before. So that gives me plenty of time. And honestly, like, because of that, and because so many other places are booked, I'm able to actually get a bit higher of a rate for that week, so it's no harm, no foul on my end. You know what I mean? So I think luckily I haven't had with a later than 30-day window, but I think you're right. I don't know that there's any documented portions from Airbnb saying that you're higher in the algorithm, but I mean, it does make sense to me.
Yeah, and I think ultimately Airbnb is definitely going to tend to be a little bit more guest friendly, and the
Mhm.
fewer restrictions that are presenting themselves to guests, whether that be like added fees, management fees, fees for extra guests, stricter cancellation policies, deposits, things like that. The more of those you can pull down, the higher you're going to rank on Airbnb, and the higher your conversions are going to be. So Airbnb is going to push you that much more. Just my theory of things, but it seems to be working out.
At the end of the day, I think it's all about just hearing out your guests and putting yourself in their shoes, and having trust that they're giving you, realistic information or truthful information, I guess I should say. But at the end of the day, it is a business, and you got to use, your judgment call. It's not Luke and Tyler's saying to do this. This is what you have to learn and grow from your own experiences. I think that's how I've learned, is just, having it happen, and kind of using my judgment to make the best call.
Yeah, I think long story short, customer service 101, you want the guest to feel heard or the customer to feel heard, and then you want to empathize with them, and then you want to offer a solution. So it's never me saying, nope, sorry, that's the policy, deal with it. It's okay, I
I
hear you.
understand.
I
Yeah.
understand. This is what we can do to make this happen, which is probably, if I'm going to say no, I'm going to creatively say no, which is
Yeah.
if it rebooks, go ahead and cancel. Or if it rebooks, I'll pay you. Go ahead and cancel. And I have actually done that. I think twice I've actually paid out a guest their money after a rebooking happened.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and they were actually really surprised. And I think one of them even came back and stayed later
I'm a
because
man
they
of
have
my
no
word.
real way of knowing. I could have just kept
Right.
both payouts, but I just didn't feel right about it and paid it forward, and it worked.
Yeah.
So
All right. Any other closing comments, thoughts, words of
no,
wisdom?
I don't think so. If anybody has anything that they have done differently, or if they have any suggestions, we would appreciate, if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment and we'll respond, and maybe we'll talk about it on the next one. But yeah, we'll go ahead and close it out. You can follow us in the peak season on Instagram. We'd appreciate a subscribe, a like, a follow, all the above, and take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Have a good one, everybody.